It is well known that children are not always sweet and cute. Some children are real devils who can drive their parents and their environment crazy. But there are also children whose fate is simply shocking and the whole world is talking about them. Today our video is about such children, because we show you 8 shocking children who kept the world in suspense. Included are children who suffered shocking fates in which the whole world participated, but also children who did shocking things and are still talked about today. As always, it's going to be exciting here at Wonderlane. Let's start our video with Lina Medina Lazo. The now 87-year-old lives a modest life with her husband in Peru, but her fate went around the world in 1939. At that time, Lina Medina gave birth to her completely healthy son Gerardo at the age of 5 years and 7 months. She is thus considered the youngest mother of all time and made medical history. Who the father of the child was, could never be clearly clarified, because the 5-year-old could not make any statements about the circumstances of the conception. But it is clear that Lina Medina suffered from the rare hormonal disorder pubertas praecox and that she was already in the middle of puberty at the age of 3. Despite the spectacular circumstances of her first pregnancy, Lina Medina and her son Gerardo were able to lead a reasonably normal life. They had the doctor who delivered their son to thank for this. He financed their education, and Lina Medina later even worked as a secretary in his office. Gerardo did die of a bone disease at the age of 40, but his passing had nothing to do with the shocking circumstances of his birth. We continue with Rachel Lee, Nick Prugo, and Alexis Nyers. The 3 teenagers were the leaders of the Bling Ring, a youth gang from Los Angeles that broke into the villas of famous Hollywood stars between fall 2008 and summer 2009. There they stole clothes and jewelry worth a total of almost $3 million. The teenagers were not at all concerned with the value of the stolen items. Their families belonged to the upper middle class and the gang only wanted to gain respectability. They were extremely brazen about it and even used the toilets of their idols. For some stars like Paris Hilton or actress Rachel Bilson, they even broke in a total of 6 times and used social media to find out their whereabouts. Lindsay Lohan, Orlando Bloom, and Megan Fox were also among the teen victims. It was only through an anonymous tip that the police got on the gang's trail and the teens were convicted. There was still no sign of remorse by then, and they allegedly even wore the stolen jewelry to their court hearings. The gang members were nevertheless convicted, and Alexis Nyers is even said to have been Lindsay Lohan's direct cellmate at times. The story of the teenagers eventually went around the world and was even filmed by Hollywood. Let's move on to a child whose fate kept the whole world in suspense. We are talking about Natascha Kampusch from Austria, who disappeared without a trace on her way to school on the morning of March 2, 1998. Natascha was just 10 years old at the time, and for 8 years it was completely unclear what had happened to the little girl. Despite extensive investigations, the child remained missing. It was not until 101 months later that Natascha suddenly reappeared, knocking on the window of an apartment building and asking for help. The resident brought her to the police, and the background of her disappearance came to light. Natascha had been pulled into a van that morning by Wolfgang Priklopel, who was unknown to her until then, and was living in the perpetrator's basement under adverse conditions. She escaped only by chance and has been living in freedom ever since. Natascha gave interviews about her fate worldwide and has already published 3 books. We continue with Andreas B., now 35, who became known as Crash Kid Andy in the early 2000s. Andreas B., from Mannheim in North Rhine-Westphalia, hit the headlines in the 1990s because even as a child he kept stealing cars and trucks and driving them around. At the age of 13, the Youth Welfare Office sent him to La Gomera for an experiential education program. There he stole the car of a supervisor in order to flee to Tenerife. Although he was stopped by the police at the ferry, he still managed to steal a boat and actually went into hiding on Tenerife for several weeks. The measure apparently brought little, because a year later there was an accident. At the age of just 14, Andreas B. stole an articulated lorry in the Netherlands and went on a 30-hour odyssey. In the end, he even broke through a police barrier and injured a policeman so severely that he died a few days later. Andreas B. was sentenced to 4 years in juvenile detention, but over the next few years he continued his criminal career. He became an intensive offender and, according to media reports, had already served more than 12 years in prison. At number 4 is another teenager who targeted numerous celebrities in the US. In 2020, Graham Ivan Clark and 2 accomplices hacked into the Twitter accounts of dozens of celebrities and asked their followers to make Bitcoin payments. And he did it at just 17 years old. Among the victims were former US President Barack Obama, then candidate US President Joe Biden, Microsoft founder Bill Gates, and Tesla CEO Elon Musk. But corporate accounts such as Apple and celebrities like Kanye West and Kim Kardashian were also hacked by the youngsters. In tweets, the hacked accounts called on their followers to send $1,000 to a specific Bitcoin address and promised to pay back the amount twice. Several Twitter users fell for the offer, and Clark and his accomplices captured an amount of more than $100,000. Investigators eventually tracked down the 3 hackers and the teenagers were arrested. Next we come to Christian Fernandez, a young man from Florida who is now 23 years old. Even if Fernandez makes an inconspicuous impression these days, he is rightly in our list. The 23-year-old has a more than shocking past. At the age of 12, he was sentenced to 7 years in prison. Shortly before that, his little brother, who was only 2 years old, died suddenly. After it was determined that someone from the outside must have intervened, Fernandez confessed to the police that he was responsible for his brother's fate. The Fernandez family's fate then went around the world. The student was charged under adult criminal law and became the youngest inmate to be sent to the Duval County Jail. As of 2018, he has been released. We continue with a little boy who is a real fighter. Little Didier from Colombia was born with a congenital melanocytic nevus, a benign but huge birthmark. Over the course of his childhood, the mole on his back grew to a gigantic size, and by the time he was 5 years old, it had already grown to a quarter of his body weight. The villagers excluded him from the community and even called him Turtle Boy. He was not allowed to go to school and had no friends. In addition, the boy suffered from physical limitations, but his mother could not afford surgery. Eventually, a British surgeon became aware of Didier and traveled to Colombia with his team to help the little boy. They removed the huge birthmark and enabled Didier to lead a completely normal life. Finally, we come to a girl whose fate not only kept the world in suspense, but is also an inspiration for many. We are talking about Malala Yousafzai, who was born in Pakistan. Already at the age of 11, Malala began to stand up for the rights of women and children. Her home region was under the rule of a religiously motivated group, and girls and women were forbidden to go to school, listen to music, and work. Malala wrote about her fate on her blog and gained international notoriety. She was a thorn in the side of her oppressors, and they wanted to keep the girl quiet. Therefore, in October 2012, they stormed a bus in which Malala was sitting and attacked her. Malala was seriously injured and had to be treated in a specialist clinic in the UK. Miraculously, the then only 15-year-old survived and was not intimidated by the attack. Instead, she became a symbolic figure for freedom and education. In the years that followed, she not only met important political figures, but was named a UN Peace Ambassador, and she is the youngest Nobel Peace Prize winner in the world. That's it for our video. Feel free to write us in the comments which child you found particularly shocking. Otherwise, like this video if you enjoyed it, and see you next time, here at Wonderland.